Hi, and welcome back to U.S. History with me, Mr. Snyder. And today we're going to take our journey through U.S. history a little bit further from the end of the Revolutionary War until the signing of the Constitution. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to talk about the first Constitution we had in our learning targets, which was the Articles of Confederation and why they didn't work. We'll talk about the compromises that were made at the Constitutional Convention in order to reach agreement on a new Constitution. We'll talk about the ratification of that Constitution and the principles held in the Constitution and Bill of Rights. So after the Revolutionary War, what now? So those 13 states, they could have broken apart, but they pledged to remain together. They all create a republican form of government where the officials are elected by the people and they represent them. All 13 states create a constitution and they all create a Bill of Rights. And a Bill of Rights is a list of individual freedoms that are guaranteed by a government, like freedom of the press, freedom of religion, the right to a trial by jury, etc. Still only, for the most part, only white male property owners can vote, unfortunately. Before the war, some women could vote, some blacks could vote. Now, blacks, free or slave, women, and Native Americans cannot vote. And here are some of the common features of state constitutions, which we'll get to when we talk about the federal constitution as well. So the states in 1777, and finally they all ratified in 1781, they collectively adopt the Articles of Confederation. And a confederation is a type of government where most powers remain with the states. So in our current system, which is called federalism, and we'll get to that in a second, the national government and the state government share power. But right now, most of the power remains with the states in the Article of Confederation. It kind of sounds like the Confederate States of America. That's why they created that form of government, because the federal government was trying to take away slavery from them. And so they wanted slavery to remain a state right, and so most of the power remained with the states in the Confederacy. Some things that the federal government cannot do under the Articles are tax citizens, and they have no say in interstate commerce or business done between the states or companies between two states. They're organizationally weak as well. There's no president. Like the leader of the country under the Articles is the leader of the legislature, which is a unicameral legislature. That means there's only one house. 2/3 of the states are needed to pass laws, whereas normally it's just a 50% plus one vote thing. A simple majority is needed. And there's no federal court system either. Here are some other weaknesses. Congress could not levy or collect taxes. The national government can't collect taxes. Where do they get their money from? They have to ask the states for money, and the states can either give them the money, they can give them partial amounts of the money, or they can not give them any money at all. And that's completely within their rights because most of the power remains with the states. We already talked about the inability to regulate interstate commerce. Each state only has one vote in Congress, regardless of its size. So Rhode Island has the same power in Congress as Virginia, and Virginia and larger states didn't think that was fair. The 2/3 majority is needed to pass laws. Articles can only be amended with the consent of all states, whereas now it's 3/4 of the states. There's no separate executive branch and no federal courts. So those are the weaknesses of the Articles, and they start to show later on. One of the good things that the government did under the Articles was helping out to kind of mediate conflicts to the western lands that are now unclaimed but belong to the United States. The Land Ordinance of 1785 creates the Northwest Territory, which is our Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, Wisconsin, and part of Minnesota. And the Northwest Ordinance of 1787 creates the rules for settling it. Basically, once a territory reaches 60,000 people, it can write a constitution and apply for statehood. And so the Congress would have to approve it, however. But other developments, this weak confederation that we have means that we don't have a standing army, so our national government can't defend its interests on the frontier. So the Spanish, they go ahead and close the port of New Orleans to prevent Americans from going west. And the British refused to abandon forts on the U.S. side of the Great Lakes, which they had promised to do. Here's a little bit of how the settling of the Northwest Territory went. You can see they divided it basically into squares, and that's why when you fly over the Midwest today, it still looks like squares. And then on the right over here, you can see Allen County and the townships that it is divided into. Most of you guys live in Washington, Perry, Eel River, or Lake townships. And so this kind of upsets people, and so Shays' Rebellion is kind of the last straw before we need to change stuff. In the 1780s, because of the weak economy, an economic depression causes lots of farmers to lose money, and if they don't have any money, they can't pay their mortgages, and in Massachusetts, the courts begin seizing farms from farmers who are delinquent on their mortgages, and they can't pay them. But they didn't think it was fair because the government is supposed to protect property rights, not take them away. And so in 1786, Daniel Shays and his armed mob of thousands of other farmers shut down the courts, because if you can't go to court, you can't foreclose on somebody's home. And Massachusetts troops have to come in and suppress the rebellion, and this just highlights the weaknesses of the federal government, and this has all of the rich white folks scared out of their gourd. Like, what if these poor people, these poor farmers are going to rise up against us and take over the government? I mean, we got to do something. And so the Constitutional Convention meets in Philadelphia in 1787. We decide the articles are broke and aren't working. So each state sends a delegate to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, to basically, they went there to amend the articles, but they end up doing a lot more than that. And some people saw this as treason. But two plans are favored. The New Jersey plan basically alters the articles very subtly. We give Congress the power to tax, to regulate trade. We keep a unicameral legislature while still keeping a loose confederation of states and keeping power with the states. That is what a small state would want. And when we say small and large states, we're talking population here. But it's easy to remember because New Jersey is small and Virginia is larger. So that's the New Jersey plan. The Virginia plan basically wants to scrap the articles and create a strong national government with a bicameral legislature where both houses are representation is based on population. So Virginia would have more votes than New Jersey or Rhode Island because it has more people living there. And they would also have an executive branch elected by Congress. Well, the small states want the New Jersey plan. The large states want the Virginia plan. The Great Compromise comes up, and basically they decide that they are going to have a bicameral legislature, which means we have two houses. One is called the Senate, which every state is equal, and they have 2 votes per state. And one is called the House of Representatives, where it's based on population. So the more population you have, the more say that that state has in the national government. And that is actually how we do it today. This Great Compromise is still how we do it today. We have a bicameral legislature, the Senate, and the House of Representatives. Now, the people in the South, they want their slaves to count as population because that would give them more say in the government. But the people in the North are saying that you don't treat them as citizens. Why should they be citizens? So the 3/5 clause is where they count each slave as 3/5 of a person toward a state's population. So every 5 slaves would count as 3 white people. This gave the South much more power in the government, and it makes Northerners furious. And this kind of starts the split between the slave states and the free states. Here is a graphic organizer. You can see the Virginia plan in orange, the New Jersey plan in blue, and the aspects of both that go into the U.S. Constitution today. We still have a Senate where all the states are equal, all states get 2 votes, and the House of Representatives, the number is based on a state's population. For example, today Indiana has 9 and California has 55 because they are a more populous state than Indiana. They're the most populous state. So taking this to ratification, we need 9 of 13 states to, or I'm sorry, 11 of 13 states to ratify the Constitution before it becomes law. And the Federalists are the people who are supporters of the Constitution. Some famous ones are James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, and John Jay. And they write what are called the Federalist Papers. And these are very, very famous documents, which are 85 famous essays explaining why the new national government, if it has a lot of power, why it would work and it would not abuse the power. It goes into things like the separation of powers and the limited government, and talks about the principles in the Constitution, which we'll get to in a minute. The Anti-Federalists are the opponents of the Constitution. They think the national government has far too much power. We just fought a revolution to get out from underneath a tyrant with too much power. Why would we give the national government that much power again? And basically, 11 of 13 states ratify the Constitution between 1787 and 1788, and it becomes law. And the last 2 ratify it by May 1790. So the compromise here is that the Anti-Federalists demand some sort of document that will protect individual rights from government interference. And so in exchange for this, in exchange for ratification, the Federalists promised to add a Bill of Rights. And the Bill of Rights is the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. And the states ratify it after the Constitution's passed, and it guarantees individual freedoms from government interference. And here are the ones that you need to know, just for an example. So freedom of speech, religion, press, assembly, and the right to petition the government are all the First Amendment. The second is the right to bear arms. The third is no quartering of soldiers. The fourth is illegal search and seizure, search warrants to search your home. The police can't search your home without it or probable cause. 5 is the rights of persons accused of crimes, and so on and so forth. Those are the rights protected by the first 10 amendments. They were passed right away. And here are your principles of the Constitution in a nice little chart for you. Popular sovereignty means that the people are the source of the government's power. The government has power because the people give it power. We, the people, are the first 3 words of the Constitution. Limited government means that the government only has powers that the Constitution gives to it. It doesn't have anything beyond that. The separation of powers means that we have 3 distinct branches. Legislative, which is our Congress, they pass laws. Executive, they execute the laws, and that is the president's job. That's his branch. And the judicial branches interpret the laws and whether or not they have been broken. And just so that one branch doesn't gain too much power over the other 2, they put in a system of checks and balances, which means that each branch has power to check the power of the other 2 branches. Federalism means that the federal government and state governments share power. And representative means that we're a republic. Citizens elect representatives to government to make the laws. And that is all I have for you today. That is the founding of our Constitution. If you have any questions, go ahead and bring them to class.